August 14th, 2005. Over the skies of Athens, the capital of Greece, a strange and terrifying guest was circling. Around 10,000 meters above the ground, a passenger plane was silently roaming, without making any contact with anyone. The frightening part was that, for the last 2 hours, this plane had not responded to any messages from air traffic control. Fear spread across Athens skies. Was this a preparation for a terrorist attack? Or was it a hijacking? Because of this fear, the Greek Air Force immediately scrambled its fighter jets. When the fighter jets reached close to the passenger plane, what they saw inside was shocking. The plane was absolutely silent. No movement, no signs of life. All passengers were sitting lifeless in their seats. Even the cockpit appeared empty. But then, the F-16 pilots saw the man in the cockpit. Someone who didn't look like the pilot. He was moving around, as if searching for something or trying to understand something. And then suddenly, the plane tilted to one side and began rapidly descending toward the ground. Within minutes, it crashed into mountains north of Athens. 121 passengers and crew members all perished. But what exactly had happened? Why was there no movement inside the plane? Why did the pilots and crew never respond to calls? And what happened after takeoff that led to this terrifying disaster? This is the story of Helios Flight 522, also remembered as the ghost plane. Morning of August 14th, 2005. At Larnaca Airport in Cyprus, 115 passengers and 6 crew members boarded Helios Flight 522. Their destination, Prague in the Czech Republic. But first, a stopover in Athens. It was summer vacation season. Most passengers were holiday makers traveling from Cyprus, many planning to get off in Athens. The captain of the flight was highly experienced, 59 years old, with over 17,000 flying hours. The first officer was 51 years old, with 7,500 hours of flight time. Normally, in such accidents, the crew's expertise is emphasized. But in this case, the story was different. The two had flown together before. The first officer often complained to friends and family about the captain's strict and harsh behavior. The airline was aware of this issue. Not only that, records showed the first officer had difficulties following checklist procedures. This detail would later prove critical. The aircraft, a 7-year-old Boeing 737-300. That morning, it took off smoothly from Larnaca Airport. As the plane climbed beyond 10,000 feet, the crew contacted Nicosia Air Traffic Control. The captain requested clearance to cruise at 34,000 feet. Permission was granted, but as the aircraft passed 12,000 feet, an alarm suddenly went off in the cockpit. The same alarm that usually sounded on the ground before takeoff, when the plane wasn't configured properly. The pilots were shocked. Why was this alarm sounding midair? After 90 seconds, the captain contacted the airline's operations center. He reported a takeoff configuration warning. He also said that the ventilation cooling fan lights were off and asked where the circuit breakers for this were located. The ground engineer replied, "Those lights are supposed to be off. The breaker is behind your seat." When asked to double-check, the captain replied, "It's not off." This confused the engineer completely. Then, the engineer remembered something. He himself had checked the plane's pressurization system before the flight. Its controls were right next to the ones the captain seemed confused about. So the engineer asked, "Is the pressurization mode set to auto or manual?" But instead of answering, the captain repeated his question about the circuit breakers. Meanwhile, inside the cabin, oxygen masks had already dropped down for the passengers. Shortly after, contact with the aircraft was lost. The plane climbed to 34,000 feet. Attempts to communicate with it failed. Air traffic controllers in Nicosia tried emergency frequencies. No response. Athens ATC tried as well. Still no reply. 2 possibilities remained. Either the radio system was malfunctioning, allowing them to hear but not transmit, or the pilots had been incapacitated or even taken hostage. Athens ATC cleared the plane to descend. No movement. After more than 20 attempts with no answer, the Greek Air Force launched 2 F-16s. By now, the plane was on autopilot, perfectly following its flight path. but it had already missed 2 descent points. It just kept circling at 34,000 feet. At 7:37 a.m., Flight 522 entered a holding pattern over Athens airport. On its 6th circle, the F-16's intercepted it. Time, 8:30 a.m. One F-16 pilot reported something chilling. The captain's seat was empty. Through the windows, passengers were visible, motionless in their seats, oxygen masks on their faces. On the 10th loop, the F-16's saw something strange. A man entered the cockpit. Wearing a light blue shirt and a black vest, he sat in the captain's seat. He put on headphones. He placed his hands on the controls. He even waved back at the F-16 pilot's hand signal. But then, disaster struck. The left engine shut down. The plane tilted left, descending. Minutes later, the right engine also failed, fuel exhausted. At 9:04 a.m., Flight 522 crashed in the mountains northwest of Athens. No survivors. Investigators immediately began their work. They questioned the ground engineer. The night before the flight, he had run a pressurization leak test. During the test, he had switched the pressurization mode from auto to manual and forgot to switch it back. At 34,000 feet, with the system on manual, cabin pressure dropped dangerously. Low oxygen, hypoxia, set in. The human brain can survive only about 10 minutes under such conditions. Confusion, disorientation, loss of consciousness, and eventually death. The pilots had 3 chances to notice this. Before taxi, after takeoff, and when the alarm sounded at 12,000 feet. But they missed them all, mistaking the warning for a takeoff configuration alert. Oxygen masks deployed, but hypoxia had already impaired judgment. Within minutes, the pilots lost consciousness. Soon after, so did the passengers and crew. The man later seen in the cockpit was identified. Flight attendant Andreas Prodromou. He held a commercial pilot's license, but was not qualified to fly a Boeing 737. The cockpit voice recorder revealed he tried to make a mayday call, but he forgot to press the transmit button. He survived longer because he and 2 other crew members had used portable oxygen cylinders. But with fuel gone and engines failed, nothing could be done. The crash was inevitable. The aviation industry learned harsh lessons. New SOPs were created. Boeing was instructed to improve pilot training, especially on differentiating warnings. Since then, no accident like Helios Flight 522 has ever happened again.